The traditional build, it was a 16-month build. They were handing over in the first 17 units. They had people moving in 5 months and they got several $1 million back from those first units.
You are listening to the Property Developer Podcast, your home for tips, ideas and inspiration to help take your developing to the next level. Now here's your host, Justin Getty.
Hello and welcome to the Property Developer Podcast. As always, it's great to have you with me. How's everything going with your project? On track? Problems being solved? Sales being made? I hope so for you. I've got a really interesting show for you, a discussion I've been wanting to have for ages. It is about how prefabrication or panelisation might be able to help you complete a project faster. Before we get to that, here's a quick update on my projects. The 20 townhouse project is ticking away, no major issues to solve at the moment. The exteriors of the front townhouses are just about done, and I expect the scaffolding to come down in the next few days or so. And the brickwork is just about done across the whole site, something that has been going on for probably 7 months. And some of the early internal fixing has started. At the rear, the kitchen cabinetry has been completed and the flooring is being laid. It won't be too long before they are basically finished. And then I want to try and get the back 10 townhouses off to the titles office so they are ready to settle. This may mean a staged handover of properties for the project, but I still have to confirm whether this is actually possible. With the new project, we are finalising the town planning package, all the drawings are done, various reports have been completed, and now the town planner is drafting his report. I expect we will be lodging with the council in the next week or so, and then we'll see how the council reacts to our proposal. So on to our guest for today, Peter Ward from Drouin West Timber Trusses. This is an interesting discussion about prefabrication or panelisation, which simply put means producing large sections of the building in a factory and then bolting it all together on site. I see real opportunities for property developers to speed up their time to completion by using panelisation techniques. Because, as you know, it is not until the project is finished that the developer gets paid. So the sooner you can get across the finish line, the better. I am currently exploring whether we may be able to use panelisation for our next build. In this conversation with Peter, we talk about how you define prefabrication or panelisation, when it can be used, and some of the benefits of going down that path for construction. I hope you find it thought-provoking and interesting. I started off by asking Peter what food he would eat until he was sick.
Seafood. Seafood, yeah, I love seafood.
Any particular type?
Oh, I like all of it, but oysters, any shellfish I do like. You're not supposed to have too much of it, but I've discovered in recent times the Alaskan king crab, and that's really good. But lobster's not bad either.
Yeah, I actually had a previous guest on the show who said lobster was his favourite.
Yeah, I just had a week in America, and basically it was steak and seafood over there was a staple down in Tennessee. The surf and turf, I think we call it here, but the steaks nearly always come out with a great big 2 lobster tails on it. I thought that was it. But I've had both enough red meat and crustacean to last me for a month, so I'm banning it for a little while.
Yeah, I think I've said on a previous episode that my brother-in-law also is a big fan of seafood, and he once ate 100 oysters at a seafood buffet.
No, I think normally a dozen would do me. But
yeah, he said he felt pretty sick after that, and he's never eaten that many again.
No, I think he'd have a new world record there.
Okay, so Peter, we're here today to talk about prefabrication, or kind of what I would call prefabrication, and we'll discuss what your definition of that, or how we sort of talk about prefab. But can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into a sort of construction type business?
Right. Well, I'm a third generation sawmiller as such, so I have a long family history in sawmilling game, but probably my grandfather got into it by default, bought a fair sized parcel of land in country Victoria when he was a young bloke, and to become a farmer he needed to clear a fair bit of the bush, so they said by default they was clearing land and milling the trees, so by nothing more than the aim of actually clearing land to become a farmer, he got into sawmilling and then discovered that there was probably more money in sawmilling, but he needed the farm for the collateral. But then my father got into it, and that was ranging. That was up on or originally was up in the New South Wales on the Dorrigo Plateau, and then they moved to Victoria. And my father then entered into it when he was about 15 or 16, I suppose. And so my dad and his partner were in it for a long time. I went to uni and did a business degree and then some postgraduate in marketing, and I worked in the corporate world till I was sort of early 30s, and my father announced, well, my mother actually announced one Christmas when I was home. I was actually in Sydney at the time working, and decided that they were going to sell the business. Dad had some health issues, and they were selling. We'd heard it for a number of years, my brothers and sisters and I, but no, this was serious. He was selling, and next thing I know, I'd bought a sawmill. So it wasn't handing over the silver spoon. It was, because it was Dad and his partner. I bought them both out as the early 30s, but it was the late 1980s, and the banks would say, you borrow money, how much do you want? And then the early 90s hit, and it was completely reversed, and we had massive interest rates and things like that. So I struggled for the first several years through the whole period. A lot of businesses didn't, but we got through it, and started to grow. And I spent 18, 20 years in 18 years in the sawmilling game. So from 2007, I set about relaunching that truss and frame business, and that's a little bit of history about how we ended up. But that's where I started to look, in 2011, 2012, really started to look at what can we do to grow the business, and that's where sort of went off on a tangent and sort of said, well, we're not just going to go and try and get another client. We've got to say, well, hey, it's very tough to get another client. Normally causes a price adjustment downward to do that. So I thought that's not attractive. Growing for the sake of growing without increasing profitability or whatever else means very little. So I started. That's when that's where it initially started. My thinking about more prefab, more panelisation, doing more to the house. Adding value, and that's where we entered into that initial research stage of, well, how do we do that?
And so when we're talking prefab or panelisation, give us a bit of an understanding of what we're actually talking about and what it means.
Okay, so everybody's probably got a little bit different definition. My definition, or probably which I think would be in line with the basic frame and truss industry, is prefab is traditionally three major products. Your roof truss, which is an engineered, off-site manufactured product. Many years ago, they would hand pitch the roof. Trusses and frames came in. Then it was lightweight engineered construction. Bigger spans. You're able to build open plan houses and things like that, which you couldn't do when you were sort of trying to hand pitch a roof and needed supporting walls to carry everything. So that was the first advent into prefab was roof trusses. From there, then wall frames then became the next sort of major target area. In the industry, it was obviously traditionally stick built on site. So the hardware store, the timber and hardware store would deliver the builder packs of timber, and he would cut them up and make the frames and build the frames on site, commonly referred to as stick framing. Prefab walls is we basically build them in a factory, on a line or on a table, and they're designed as if you like breaking it down into walls, and they're prefabricated and delivered to site and stood up on site. And then you have the other product, which is growing market, smaller blocks, more double-storey houses. You have the first floor elements, so you get into then either floor trusses, I-beams, or common posies, that type of thing. We actually manufacture an equivalent to a posi, but we use a timber open web long reach floor truss that allows services to go through, and then normally they're delivered to a floor design of the building, and traditionally the builder would install them on site. So we would be a supply scenario. So it'd be prefabricated in the factory, supply only to site, and that's the traditional prefab market as we would know in Victoria, or probably in Australia. The panelisation is what the differentiating thing there, as I see, is that being able to take those products and look at them and say, well, how do we do more? How do we add value? So panelisation. With the roof truss, basically there's an opportunity in the future there would be a roof panel, so that it might not even incorporate a roof truss, but it'd be a panel scenario where you could drop the roof on and basically get the house to being watertight in a very short period of time. We're exploring those avenues, as we speak. But where we ended was saying, well, the floor cassette panel. So normally it's had long reach floor trusses or posies delivered to site, builder install, and then they would then install them, then lay down the floor, and maybe 2 to 3 days get the floor system in and working at heights on standing on floor joist rather than putting the floor in. We looked at the OH&S issues and the value proposition, said, well, why don't we look at that and saying, well, hey, we're delivering it as a block, the builder's putting them out, putting them on site, why don't we build them as a panel? That had been happening in the Europe and Scandinavian countries, and also had seen it happening in Canada and America, in starting to really take off as a floor panel or a floor cassette. And so we got into that, and we said, well, okay, that's great. That's initial product that add value. You can have a working structural platform in the house down in a couple of hours. So in a double-storey house, in the same day, you could start in reality standing up your walls, like your upper walls, and keep the project going, reduce time. And that then led us to saying, well, if we're doing the floor cassettes, then the walls. As I said, traditionally a prefab wall, just a timber framed wall, fabricated into a length and a height. In one way, it's sort of like a panel, but open. We thought, well, the next stage would be, well, why can't we put the external cladding in, put the window in, have the external cladding on, and actually get the house to lock up? So we did a fair bit of market research and found that the lock-up stage was a critical stage for the builder. At that stage, normally in a progress payment scenario, you would get 65% of the payment. And we thought, well, gee, if we can reduce that to saying that, from if he gives us a concrete slab or a site level, then we can put either onto a concrete slab or our own floor system in a ground level or first floor, and we can get that house ready for the roof to go on with inside a week, then potentially he's got the ability to be able to get his progress payment for lock-up, 65% of the house in a very short period of time, reduced to days instead of several weeks. And that reduces the overall construction time, because once he's got the roof on and he's watertight, all the services go in. He's not governed by the weather. Something could be happening every day, and even further reduces build time. So that's my sort of definition. What I would say is taking prefab to panelisation. And initially, as I said, we're targeting to get the house to lock up, so that it's watertight and progression can go on. Ultimately, our system does allow us to look at, and we have done a prototype in even doing a closed panel wall, which has got then, the plumbing, the electrical, the insulation, and even the plaster on an internal wall. But that is we see that as stage 2 or the next generation of housing, and is what we've done. We have done some prototype development, but we do see from the builder, the developer, and the project sort of scenario is that that lock-up seems to be a critical stage, and if you can reduce that to a few days, then I think that's where you eliminate the whole structural element of the house is done. The rest of it is in some ways cosmetic, because you've got the structural element of the house up and secure from weather.
I think it took us 8 months to get our back townhouses to that stage
8 months,
in the current project, so a couple of weeks would be pretty amazing.
Yeah, we did. The 59 unit one we did at Craigburn just recently. We were achieving lock up in the unit about every 2 to 3 days.
So I'm picturing in a sort of basic way your 4 walls, the doors in, the windows in. Yep. You've got some kind of external cladding around the ground floor, the upper floor, roof on.
Yes. Yep.
In a couple of days.
Yes. Yeah. Normally we did. Our first project was a small house, down the beach area, but single story. But we had a tiled roof on, and they would book the tiling roofing company guys to come in and do it on day 5. So on day 5, they had the roof on. All the external walls were clad with a weatherboard type cladding, windows in there as well. So so structurally the guy could lock the door, and it was at locker, so it was watertight, and just the trades, all the following trades just rolled in. So once it's like that, plumbers, electricians, plaster goes in, painting, sort of thing. It happened, really quickly. They completed that house in about 6-7 weeks. It was just sort of phenomenal, because he had it just lined up, and he had to move in. His brother was moving into the house, so it was sort of a joint sort of effort. But
it's pretty incredible, the timing. So
yes.
Can you tell us, how does it work in with a developer working with a builder and a designer? How does that sort of holy trinity work together?
Yeah, it's that's a bit of a challenge, right? It is. And obviously, from a developer's point of view, if he, from the developer's point of view, I would see that the key element there is that he would like to see the development built as quickly as possible, so he can hand it over, receive his money, and get the tenants in, and it be becoming a paying venture. So we identify that the same as the builder. Obviously, if the builder can build quicker, he then gets paid quicker. Also, he actually can build more, so he actually has the ability to increase his profitability of his total business. Because if it takes him 8 months to build something, and we can halve it, well, he should be able to do 2, because provided he's got the next job to go to, then he can increase his profitability substantially. That's sometimes a challenge, convincing the builder of that. And with the developer, normally the developer will develop a project, working with his architect and everything, get the whole thing designed, and then possibly go to tender, and call for 2 or 3 builders to quote on the job. And we've had that experience where we've sold the concept to the developer, and he's very keen on it. But when he goes to the builder sort of says, "Well, I've priced it at this price or whatever else, and I've got my own trades and things like that." So you then can potentially get back into the whole negotiating thing all over again, and trying to sell the concept to the builder again. So we are, Drouin West is not the builder as such. We really try and work in with the builder. We don't want to be the builder. We want to work, with the builder as a major, subcontractor to the builder, and sell the benefits to him, then to sell it. But if it's, the best way it works is usually when it's the developer, the builder is already chosen, and we actually, and ourselves, and we work in. We have, before even town planning, it is the ideal scenario, because we can have input into such things as the cladding's chosen, because our system works well, very well with some claddings, and others not so well. So we would say, in the James Hardy type product range, we'd say, well, don't use linear weatherboards, use stria, because we can install stria on our automated line, very efficiently. Whereas the stria is the linear weatherboard is a product that you would say that we can do it more efficiently, most likely, than being on the second story of some scaffolding on site where you're trying to fit it, but it's still a manual operation in the factory off the main line. So you don't, neither party reaps the full benefits of an automated line to be able to do things. So we try and influence, or have some input into the type of, products and claddings chosen, and that then benefits everybody in the fact that, sometimes people will put window heights in at 1180 off the floor, and we say, well, most sheeting products are 1200 or whatever else as well. So move the window up 20 mil, and you're not cutting a little piece. It's not being cut off, thrown away, going to landfill, waste, etc., etc. So there's a whole lot of things that can be engaged. And the other aspect of it is our flooring system. Sometimes there's, in a number of developments, you can end up with a fair bit of steel work. We try and work with the engineer and say, well, hey, no, if we design the floor system this way, we don't need that steel work, or we don't need those big heavy beams. We can design our floor system that can carry the loads or carry the upper story, load bearing wall, and eliminate steel work, which reduces cost. And normally, I shouldn't say this, but it's normally one of the things that really is a hassle on site, is the steel work. And so we try and engineer it out wherever possible. Sometimes, from an economic point of view, you just can't. But most of the times, on most of the projects, we've been able to reduce it significantly, and that allows us to speed up our process. We're not waiting on a third party to come in and do steel work.
Yeah, well, I know I'm getting you guys to have a look at our design for our next project to see if it might be possible to use the system. So it'll be interesting to see what feedback we get.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go back and talk about some of the objections maybe that you get from builders and architects and how maybe you can overcome those or perhaps preempt them and as a developer maybe soften up your team a little bit.
Yeah, it is basically, we've found that, in all due respect, all the builders, they're very, conservative lot. You really, like this is a new system. A lot of the builders in the early days would say, yeah, look, we know it's the future, hence our name, future, and then, but always, all our research came back, yes, that's the future, that's the way it's going, we know, but, does it work, does it fit, will it all go together? So, that's where our Future Fit name came from, because it just kept coming back at us, bouncing back to us in all our research. But then the builders are conservative, and they've got traditional building methods. So it has presented a little bit of a challenge to sell the concept. But once we've found that the builder has used it or the developer has used the system, they're hooked on it. So every client that we've done a project for has been a repeat client, for us, and so that's probably the best testimony we can get. Sometimes difficult to get around the aspect of, okay, they just want to compare our roof truss, our wall frame and our floor system to that stage, and they say, oh, but okay, you're more expensive, or and we say yes, but the fact that if we reduce time significantly, then your supervisor on site that you might have there for 8 months, he's only there for 4 months. Or how much saving do you have? So then he can go to the next project. You've got perimeter, security fencing all around your project. Well, if your project finishes 4 months earlier, or you get the lock-up months earlier, then that perimeter fencing can go. So you haven't either got, whether you own it or you hire it, you've got cost. Huh? You clean up, a study in the States with the panelisation and off-site manufacturer just proven that, there's up to 30 times more waste on site when you conventionally build versus the prefab build. So that's landfill. It's, to a builder, it's cost. These days I know I'm paying $110 per cubic metre to get rid of waste. Huh?
Which is another OHS issue.
Another OHS issue, yes.
Pieces around the site.
That's right.
Our development site at the moment is reasonably clean, but there's
keeping it clean and everything else
everywhere and
that's
rubbish
right.
and all sorts of bits and pieces.
And not to mention theft. If it's all if it's all delivered in individual form, then you've got the real risk of theft, which is an increasing problem, and all builders are telling us about. That they deliver one day and they come back for the chippies and that start tomorrow, and they say, where's the timber? And it's well, it was there yesterday. Well, it's not there today. It's gone. And then the other aspects of it, it's just the time to construct. Again, that study that talked about waste in the American study, it also identified that they built 2 identical houses, one conventional build. Right next door, they built a panelised build. It took 2.5 times time to build the house conventionally than it did in a panelised house. So they said, basically by definition, you can build 2.5 houses in the time that it takes you to build one. So there's some very, intrinsic benefits in the system, getting your head around it and looking at it as a holistic project rather than actually to a lock-up stage project or to any other stage project, or just, the roof truss components, your roof trusses are $50, $100 or $500 dearer than somebody else's. But, hang on a minute, where the total system and the total package, you complete quicker, you get onto the next project, whereas where you make your next lot of profitability, and time is money, and that's what we hang our hat on. Time is money, and if you can value the time aspect, then it comes back very quickly.
All right, so we've softened up the builder. What about the architect or the designer, when they get a little bit funny about
that's right.
Hinging on their design sensibilities?
Well, I have my eldest daughter is an architect, so I live with that problem every day. I think there's a few definitions that like my design team. We've got a 10-man design team that are designers and engineers and that on board with us, and they were constantly sort of saying, the architects draw magnificent pictures on paper, and lines everywhere and different, angles and different things. We've then got to work out how the heck do we make it stand up and structurally sound. So that's a constant scenario. But I think that again, it is a changing trend. They've been doing this. They've been doing this in the Scandinavian countries for 30 years because of the climatic conditions. You only got a very short window of opportunity to be on site because it's 30 degrees below and 10 foot of snow or something. But so they've been doing it. I think I think that architects are now realising that they need to should work with the system. It's the way of the the future. Affordability of housing and construction now is got to a stage where it's it's unaffordable to a lot of people, which is a dangerous scenario. So I think that our system, if it can shorten the build time, there is either opportunities to reduce the cost or to increase profitability. That's up to the developer to choose to where he might be or the builder. But and to the architect, I think that there's opportunities. We've built some quite I would say some quite well designed units and developments. There's certain things that you can do. Huge big cantilevers and things like that by its very nature introduce a heap of steelwork and things like that. Look good once on, but there's other designs that you could say, hey, work with the system. Scaffolding, OH&S. Having to I think if the builder or the architect can work in with the system and find more affordable ways of building a structure, I think and be at the forefront of that technology, then I think it's incumbent on him to take that back to his clients and his developers to say, well, here's a better way of doing it. And this can speed the process, can potentially reduce costs or increase profitability. I would think that architect would be in a pretty good space, with his clients to be able to deliver something like that.
Yeah. Well, I've been trying to soften up the builder and the architect at the moment about perhaps going down a panelisation system, so we'll see how we go. Yeah. Now, I'm just thinking, obviously something that's got fairly straight lines, a kind of box or a rectangular, very simplistic way type of build. Obviously, I would assume would work quite well. Ideally, is that correct?
Yes, ideally, we won't refer to the box-on-box scenario, but basically, if you look at most developments in the the medium-density housing area, apartment things, they basically are either 2 or 3 story type structures that are rectangular in shape. That type of thing where you've got a number of similar units, might have different facades, like claddings and things like that, but basically the structure or the design internally is similar. You get some benefits from standardisation, being able to repeatability, rather than designing an individual house where you have to spend an inordinate amount of time, because in our structure we need to design everything up front. We need to think of everything before we go to site, and it's not a matter of and therefore, so there's a lot of time involved at the front end in designing it before we go to site. But we've been now doing that for the best part of 3 years, and we've got, I believe we've got quite good at it, and we have, and it works, quite successfully. So it's.
And what kind of projects or what kind of builds wouldn't be suitable?
Would be or wouldn't? Wouldn't. Well. It's interesting. When we first started, we said, well, you were looking for projects, so you would sort of say, we sit there thinking, what's the ideal project, or waiting for it to come along. You think, well, so I used to say to our design team, it's never going to come. You've got to sort of say. So we've done individual small single-story beach houses down the coast. We've done some double-story townhouse scenarios where they're 3/4 of them are brick, and it's got a little bit of cladding on, in some cases on half of the upper story. And then the ideal project is where and there seems more and more of a trend to moving away to lightweight exterior claddings, away from brickwork. Like in essence, if the person wants a brick clad house, then our full panelised system is not ideal. You know, I mean, there's no advantage as such. You know? It's if the person can move away from that thinking and say that, you know, if it, you know, like there's a lot of houses that get bricked and then they're rendered. So you've got a rendered, you know, sort of monolithic, you know, sort of building. You think, well, you know, why does it have to be? Why does it have to be brick in the first place? You know, there's lightweight claddings. You know, the EPS. You know, we use and recommend a master wall system, which is you know, is fantastic thermally. You know, you a brickwork facade, a brick veneer scenario, you get a 0.5 of an R rating, you know, R rating out of a brick veneer sort of house. You know, you use you know, a master wall or EPS ring, you get a 4. Right? If you go to a thicker material, you know, sort of a brick's 110 mil thick or whatever it is in depth. If you went to above 80 mil in an EPS, you can get a R rating that actually means that there's no need to insulate your walls. You know, for example, because you're getting that much of a thermal rating from the exterior cladding that you know, you don't need to. If you do, you can move to an 8 or 9 star, you know, house, even towards a, you know, a passive type house. So from an energy point of view, which is, I don't know about you, but you know, my electricity bills and gas bills are just, you know, seem to keep going up and up and up. So you know, if I was, you know, personally building another house again, you know, there's no way I'd look at a brick scenario. I mean, people tend to think that it's you know, it's strong, it's structural, and it's, you know, you knock on it and it's solid and everything else as well. But from a living enjoyment, you know, energy efficiency point of view, it's you know, probably one of the least products that you would use.
So we're talking a lightweight cladding around the ground floor,
and
a lightweight cladding around the top floor. Obviously,
typically we've
materials.
So you look at a lot of developments now where they might have a rendered solid type look downstairs. Well, that could be, you know, traditionally it was brick and rendered, for example, or face brick. You know, if it was rendered, then you know, traditionally it was brick. Now we're saying, you know, we would recommend there, you know, it's like a master wall scenario. Then upstairs it could be, you know, any one of the a lightweight cladding, you know, in, you know, the James Hardy or the CSR or the WeatherTex type scenario where you've got, you know, a lightweight cladding, you know, upstairs, and you get a combination of different panels and different facades depending on, you know, your choice, to create a look that is quite modern and quite workable, and can significantly, you know, improve the time. You know, on the projects we've been working on recently, you know, getting, you know, there's a huge shortage of bricklayers, and as a consequence of that, the bricklayers are really holding everyone, you know, to you know, supply and demand scenario. And B, you know, not to mention, it just, you know, on a project there was 4 units out of 59 that had a lot of brickwork on them. Well, they were the last ones to be completed, and basically had been, you know, sitting there waiting for the bricklayers to come.
Well, that's what caused a delay of about 4 months of the front townhouses at our project.
Yes.
Waiting for the brickie to get back on and do the block work.
Yeah, and then when you look at brickie, it's one of the worst. I shouldn't say this again, but it will be upfront because we're competing against it in our system. But you know, it's you know, for a clean-up site, the mess on site, the OH&S issues on site, all those issues, you know, sort of are lending itself to, you know, why people are you know, really moving away. But I think that, you know, I think one of the major scenarios is just the shortage of good quality bricklayers these days. All the guys that have been, you know, the baby boomers are getting older and moving into these townhouses, not necessarily building them.
Yeah, well, I was out on our site earlier this week, and there's been a bricklayer that's been pretty much on site the whole year. He's been there about 10 months.
Wow.
I said to him, you must have got your post redelivered to here by now.
Yeah, no. So it's you know, on you know, decent jobs it is, you know, and it, you know, it's slow going. You know, it's relatively slow going. You know, like, I mean, I know they can, you know, throw them in, but you know, basically, you know, 1,000 bricks a day, but it's 50 bricks to a square metre, so you know, it takes time, and if the reality now is that you know, blocks are smaller, so houses are going double story, and you know, as soon as you go to second story, or you know, a lot of the townhouses we built at Craigburn were 3 story, so you know, to be scaffolding that and bricking that, it's just, you know, it's massive and expensive.
It's interesting you talk about triple stories, because hasn't there been some legislative changes to enable stick
lightweight framing.
Lightweight framing.
Light framing and deemed to satisfy rules. I mean, basically, the lightweight framing guide for residential housing, etc., has normally been that the regulations were to 8 metres, which was to eave height. So that tend to traditionally say that you are in the double-storey housing market, single or double-storey. In May of this year, they moved it to 25 metres. So in essence, to align it more to what's happening around the world, and that enables potentially to build up to 8 stories in timber structures, and that's been a fantastic change. It's opening up. In our own business, we're seeing the opportunity now where we're doing 3-storey, and even with a project where they're talking about 4-storey. So we see that opens us up into aged care developments, potentially hotel motel type developments, medium density housing, which was traditionally 2-storey, it's now 3-storey, and now they're talking 4-storey, because you can do it, in light framing, so that's some exciting times. I think it's the change in that legislation and the change in more and more people sort of starting to get excited about off-site manufacture and panelisation is invigorated our industry. I see talking to whether it's whether you're a Prida fabricator or a MyTech fabricator or whatever, the panelisation, even those companies seem to be invigorated by it, because it's creating new opportunities, new products, an opportunity for growth, and which is historically for a long time has been the concrete and steel domain. It's now sort of bringing back timber structures, which have happened in Europe for quite some time, and so you're seeing CLT, cross-laminated timber structures and entering the market. The XLAM are building their the cross-laminated timber plant to develop the product here locally out of our local resource. So then that I think that'll excite the whole industry and look at some exciting opportunities in that up to 8-storey development.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So for developers out there that are maybe thinking, oh look, I might consider this for my next project, how far out would they then start to think about talking with somebody like yourself or someone in their local state or area?
I would. The bottom line would be to start. The earlier you start, engaging, the better it is. I think that we've, to date, with a lot of early adopters, they come to us with a project and say, "Can you panelise it?" Right. So we're sort of almost a bit of a rearguard or reactionary sort of thing. Okay, yes, all right, we can work this out. Yes, we can do it, and we work in, and that's certainly possible, and that's probably 90% of what we've done to date. An ideal scenario would be, with actually the client that we did the 59 units, they're talking about a project. They've got 106 units to do in about May to July next year starting, so they want to sit with us and talk to us about what we would recommend and how we would do it before they even go to town planning. So because once you put town planning up and you put a facade and you name that cladding or whatever it is on there, that basically needs to be what goes on there. And we would say that we can 90% of the time we can create that look with a product that actually works with our system rather than maybe some other product. And so there where we see that early engagement certainly helps, but in round figures we need we say, depending on the size of the project, we need minimum of 4 to 5 weeks before you would be on want to be on site, rather than a builder saying, "Look, the slab's going in next week. I need something to be happening the week after." We've had that, and we just said, "Well, I'm sorry, it's a 10-unit development, and you want us there in 2 weeks. Because we've got to design everything up front and be there, and we try and convince them to say, look, it's not when we start, it's when we finish is the critical point. If the slab sat there for 3 or 4 weeks, before we were on site, but we finished." You completed you 3 months earlier, most people would think that that's a good outcome. But convincing the builder and the developer, as soon as he sees a slab on the ground, he wants something to be happening. Just by human nature, they want, look, we could have stick built this by now, or et cetera, et cetera. But we'd say that you won't get to completion date. So we've had all those scenarios, but ideal scenario, the earlier that they engage, the better. but in reality, 4 to 6 weeks, would be what we require as a minimum, and time beyond that would be advantageous. But
so pre-town planning is ideal. But
yes.
Otherwise, if you've already got the plans,
if we say
there's some options.
Yeah, and talking pre-town planning, being able to go, obviously, no one wants to keep going back to their engineer or back to their architect because it always costs. So the earlier scenario, getting a bit of a mindset about how and what we can do and what works and what doesn't, is to take that concept to your architect and your engineer. Like we quite often we then spend a lot of time engaging with the engineer on there to say that, okay, look, the way you've designed this and where you've got your stairwells and how you've got the beam and steel structural, with our floor system we can do this and that. Are you happy with that? Because we need them to sign off on it. So we give them a timber solution. Then that usually works as well. So the earlier that everyone's engaged in the project, it'll go smoother. We sort out some problems. We start people. It's traditionally they'll be a lot of the plans are left a little bit open so that you've sort of got flexibility, but then you've got room to say, well, what are you doing here? And then that normally on a normal construction site, that's thought of when you get to it. we sort of say, well, no, we'd like to think about it now because we model everything in 3D and then we build it and we have a look at it and we examine every component and all the junctions and how they go together, how the joining of one townhouse to the next townhouse, or how is that interacting, how is it going? So in the ideal world, the earlier that we engage, the better it would be for all parties. But in saying that, the real world, we work around the fact that here's a project. Okay, can we do it? And we'd say then, but when we found that and we've actually sorted it out, and we build, usually that client will come back with his next project. He'll engage earlier because he'll see that he now understands what we're talking about and the benefits of actually saying, well, we'll do this, and this rather than this. In the first project we had, big project we had, the balconies and the firewalls were all done by third parties. So we were waiting on third parties. They were holding up our structure. On the last 12 of the 59 unit development we did, we said, look, we decided that we designed a balcony cassette, for the balcony because the balconies were done by other parties and we're waiting for them to be done. But these were 3-story units, had a balcony on the second floor. That balcony was actually holding up holding up the walls for the top story. So the balcony had to go in before we could put the top story up. And the balcony was being done by a third party that was inevitably always not there when he was supposed to be there or not completing when we did. So we developed a floor cassette for that scenario. So we actually brought us back into the control scenario. So when we put our floor in, we actually dropped the balcony cassette in as well, and we could keep going straight up. And those last 12 units, we had completed those last 12 units, and they were still doing finishing touches to the previous 15. So it just it sped us up, and we're now looking at with the fire rating wall scenarios and developing a system. So we've got the fire rating on our wall panel, so it actually comes a wall panel that we drop in rather than actually put an open prefab wall in and then third party come in and do the shaft liner or the firewall system. Again, that way it meant we had to build every second unit and leave the middle one out so they were coming and doing both walls on their side and then come back and infill that unit. We thought, well, why can't we develop the system and we can just keep going? Speed and time is money, and if we can do that in the factory and it's done automated, to putting a cladding fire rated product on that wall, I believe we can do it more efficiently and quicker, and hopefully at least as cost effective, if not more, than being done on site.
And then, so once you get to that lock-up stage, then it's just the builder sends all his other trades into.
That's right. Yeah, we would have a scope of work saying these are what we do and this is where we get to. We normally at this stage, because it's a roof truss, we would put the roof trusses in, waiting for the roofing plumber, or whatever to come and put the roof on. So we need to, the builder and ourselves need to liaise with that builder, with that contractor to make sure that we're saying, hey, next Thursday you need to be there putting the roof on because then you're watertight. the builder even getting his head around the fact that, look, that's going to happen so quickly. He normally thinks, well, I've got 6 weeks before I have to worry about the roof, so he hasn't even teed up the roofing plumber, or he's got the contract that he normally uses teed up, but he doesn't realise that that's 6 or 8 weeks out, and now it's all of a sudden no, it's next week. So you have to get the mindset around that as well, that it actually how quick it does go once it's rolling out, and but usually the first one is for the builder is a bit of a learning experience as well, but they see that well, I would say every client we've seen would say that they've seen the benefits of it, and are quite wrapped in the result, and we do. The other aspect of it is on a larger project, our system, it's all built the same, it's all designed the same, so you get uniformity of quality everything. Like on a big structure site, though, like if they were the one that we did at Craigieburn, 59 units, they said they would have probably had 25 to 30 carpenters there each working in a team building certain units, and that team would have a certain way of doing it, that would have a certain way of doing it, that way do it, and you'd have different guys that doing different, maybe doing the different claddings. You might end up with 3 combinations, or a number of combinations, whereas ours, it runs and it's the same. We've designed it, and once we've designed it, it's repeated. So you get.
It brings a tear to my eye, Peter, thinking that we could be finished by now with our current development, and I could be sitting on a beach in Acapulco. But anyway,
or into your next project, and
exactly.
and then you could go twice a year to Acapulco.
I like the sound of that. So if people are interested in panelisation, where would they go to find out more information?
Well, there's nothing but from flying the Drouin West flag. We would say initially visit our website, have a look at we've got a bit of gallery there of a number of projects we've done. There's some some frequently asked questions on there, sort of scenario. You can do that, or alternatively, or
video. There's a great video on there showing
some videos showing some projects and the time. So as I say, we're talking about the time, but a picture tells 1,000 words. Watching some of the videos, there's videos there on our website that you can go under in the product scenario and look at floor cassette scenarios, wall panel scenarios, or you can see a whole 12-unit townhouse development going up in that went up in Clyde, in southeastern suburbs of Melbourne, and or there's even I think the latest video up there is on the 59-unit development over there. Some pictures and things of the project there.
Which is pretty amazing when you watch that.
Yeah,
see how quickly it got knocked up, 2 weeks or something to lock up.
Yeah, and so they are a good reference source to have a look. We're very proud of what we've sort of done. We've come a long way in the 2 years from when we started doing, a little single-story, coastal home that was down the Bass Coast area. It was hidden away, sort of thing. We thought we'll cut our teeth on that, but to now, doing a 59-unit one. The client saying, well, now he's got a 106-unit one to do, 106 triple stories. So again, this 106 triple stories, sort of thing.
And what's the address of the
website? That one. Our website is dwtt.com.au. So just Drouin West Timber and Truss. But if you just type in DWTT, it'll find it in Google. It'll find it, and you can go from there. And if not that, then our phone number's there. Give us a call. We've got a number of guys in the team that would welcome inquiries and initial discussions to talk through, and then if it goes from there, we would tee up a suitable time to to meet and discuss and see what we can provide and take it from there.
So you're based in Victoria.
That's correct.
What sort of area would you do you service most of Victoria, or sort of Melbourne?
Yeah, we have. Craigieburn's 118 kilometres from Drouin, but we've done projects in the southeast. We've done Craigieburn. We've got one to do in Caroline Springs early in the new year. So because we're adding significant value, the tyranny of distance is not as bad as it otherwise would. Like traditionally, if we had a client that was coming from way out in the northern part of Melbourne to Drouin to sort of want to buy roof trusses, the first question we normally would ask is why you've passed 30 truss plants to get to us. So you sort of think of all the other reasons of why that might be. But now because we're pioneering it, to a large extent. But what we have found, because we're adding significant value, the geographical spread and locations that we can go to. The reality is, once you've got it on the truck, going an extra 15, 20 or 50 k's is not bad. I mean, probably the best scenario today, we have actually done a house that we sent to the Hunter Valley in New South Wales, so that was some 1,200 kilometres away. So we probably don't want to do that as an ongoing scenario every time. But we're talking to a national country, a national company that has got projects in Victoria, South Australia, New South Wales, and Queensland, and we've had to price the thing, but they're looking at the benefits of standardisation, off-site manufacture, speed of construct, being able to offset the differential in those freight costs. So they're very really studying that hard to look at that, to say that okay, if we can build standardise that project and get it completed in a very short period of time, maybe an extra several $1,000s in the freight cost is a price that they're prepared to pay.
I'm certain that it will be.
Yes.
It's a pretty exciting prospect, I think, with the time saving. So
yes.
I really would encourage listeners out there, developers out there, to look into it and see if it's something that might work for them.
And that is the key. It's the time is the big saving, and the opportunity cost of that, really, or the opportunity that it presents. We'd say to the builder, well, if you halve your time, you can build twice as many houses in a year. What does that do to your business or your whole business model? Even small builders said, I'm building 10 or 12 houses, but if I could build to 20, I've got a very sustainable, business at 10 or 12. It's tough. Well, but to go to 20, they normally have to increase their infrastructure quite substantially. Like more supervision labour, more this, more that. We see our business model works in with the builder to say, well, no, you don't. The builder can actually, your current supervisor can supervise more jobs if they actually complete quicker. Mm-hmm. So therefore he becomes more efficient. And we're saying that and then we've had a few clients that have actually taken that and capped onto that and actually see the benefit of it. So they haven't had to. They can grow their business without actually growing their infrastructure or their costs.
Yeah.
So
pretty exciting.
So we see that as thing rather than actually being hammered down with to the thing that, well, okay, we might be a little bit more expensive. We certainly don't come at it from the point of view that at that up to that lock-up stage that we might be a little bit more expensive than the traditional build. But if you've got there in weeks instead of months, what is that worth to you? What's the carrying cost? The fact if you can actually complete, like we did a Craigieburn, they, in 5 months, they said traditional build, it was a 16-month build. They were handing over in the first 17 units. They had people moving in 5 months, and they got several $1 million back from those first units. So they actually then, not only, we were thinking, 6 or 8 months saving was about between $45,000 and $50,000 interest costs on a $25-30 million project. But the reality is they got $6 or $7 million back 5 months into the project that actually helped finance the balance of the project.
All right, stop it, Peter. You're making my eyes water.
Yeah.
Starting to get...
They're all the good things.
A bit emotional.
Yeah.
Thinking about the possibilities. All right, well, Peter, I've really enjoyed talking to you today, and I'm very grateful to you for your time. Thanks for being on the Property Developer Podcast.
Okay, no worries. Thank you very much.
Okay, there you go, folks. What an interesting conversation. I don't know about you, but I like the idea of finishing construction 6 months ahead of schedule. How awesome would that be? I hope that the discussion has sparked some ideas for you and got you thinking about using different techniques to complete your next project. I have been in discussion with our architect and builder about whether this may be a viable option for our next proposed development, so it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. But first we have to get our planning permit. So I took quite a few thoughts away from my conversation with Peter, including these. 1. Consider different ways to build. Have you explored different building techniques or ways to construct? There is a lot of innovation happening in the building game, and also other industries that can be used to help improve the efficiency of your project. For example, I have read that Henry Ford got his idea for the assembly line from a meat packing factory, which very efficiently moved the animal carcass along a line while butchers progressively removed and packed the parts. Perhaps you can speak with your builder or designer about possible new techniques, or check out industry bodies to see what is new or innovative in that sector. For example, I saw a video of a robot bricklayer just recently, which would greatly reduce the time it takes to lay bricks on a site. 2. Consider different materials. How about looking at eradicating different elements, like bricks, which can slow down the building process? Can you use a lightweight cladding rather than something else? There are lots of alternatives out there, so again, speak with your designer, builder or industry bodies about what options you may have. And 3, is there a system solution you can use? Think about whether you can work with a panelisation or pre-fabrication supplier to produce a product that meets your market's expectations and helps you get through the project quicker. You may be able to find a supplier that can offer a design and production package that you're happy with. There are a few alternatives to the standard building package, so do some research and see what you can find. You might just surprise yourself. Okay, that just about wraps up another episode of the show. Don't forget to find me on Instagram at Property Developer Podcast for my project photos and development videos. You can also find all the previous episodes of the show at www.propertydeveloperpodcast.com. Thanks again for listening in, and until next time, may all your projects finish a few months early.
You've been listening to the Property Developer Podcast. Tune in next time for more tips, ideas and inspiration to take your developing to the next level. For more developing love, make sure to visit propertydeveloperpodcast.com.